Account determination in FIMM integration is one of the primary steps between this FIMM integration. So all the GL account determination is something that we are going to do at this point. Now, rather than taking you through the standard configurations, the different steps of configuration in order to do this FIMM integration, let us try to understand why we are doing it so that we find it very easy, we find it very logical on why or what are all different steps that we are doing, and it also helps us never to forget the linkage between your GL account and your MM transactions. Hey, this is Abhiram and welcome back to my channel. Before we proceed further into the video, do not forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done yet. You can also now join the channel and contribute to help me post many such wonderful videos. If you're not looking for a recurring subscription, you can also hit the thanks button below the video to do a one-time contribution, and that will help me a lot to prepare many such wonderful videos and share it with you all. So this is the basic P2P cycle. So let us ignore of these two because here we are not bothered of any of accounting entries. Our main accounting entries which are falling in FIMM integration or which are falling under FIMM integration are these two. So one is your goods receipt, other one is your invoice receipt. Now these both are completely our FI only wherever we are doing this F110 transactions or we are doing a bank reconciliation. There is no MM involvement. But these two are the primary points of integrations for FIMM integration. So first one is your goods receipt. Now in the goods receipt, the accounting entry is your inventory gets debited. That means your stock is getting increased because we're receiving it from your supplier, and your GRIR intermediary account or control account is getting credited. That means we are parking this balance or parking this amount of the value of the inventory on a contra account called as a GRIR account, which ideally we are supposed to clear it at the time of your invoice receipt to ensure or to understand that the invoice has also been received for this particular stock what we have received from the vendor. So this is the accounting entry that gets posted for during your goods receipt in the MyGo transaction. Now, how can we determine the GL accounts for this one? Let us assume we have determined some inventory account for this one and GRIR account for this one. So how are we going to determine? How the system is going to understand that, okay, this is a MiGo transaction and this is a Myro transaction, how it is going to differentiate and what are all the accounts that are going to be assigned here. So what are two different types of accounts that we're having here? One is your inventory account, the other one is your GRIR account. Similarly, if you see here, one is your GRIR account and other one is your vendor account. So there are three different types of account that we saw totally till this point. The tax and your withholding tax are something that is derived from your FI settings. Tax is determined based on the tax code that you are mentioning in the purchase order. The account determination for this one will fall under OP40, or if it is India GST, then there are Indian specific GST specific transactions which we use. Or again, withholding tax is something that is determined in your vendor master data, and there is a separate configuration for this one. So I'm not focusing on these two at this point. But let us focus on the three different types of account what we saw. One is your inventory account, one is your GRIR account, and the other one is your vendor account. Vendor account, obviously there is nothing of account determination here again. This is something the vendor on which you have created the purchase order. So there is no big deal of how this account is getting determined. So these are two major types of accounts. One is your GRIR account and other one is your inventory account. Now the GRIR account is being called in MyGo. It is also called at Myro. And in addition to these two, there are a lot of other MM transactions. For example, if you are posting a stock just by debiting your cost center, then also the system try to understand or system needs to find out what is the inventory account and what is the consumptions account that the system should identify. So there are different types of accounts. So how the system is going to understand what is this type of account or what is this type of transaction and what is the account determination that the system needs to do. So each and every transaction is assigned to something called as a transaction key. For example, your MyGo is having a transaction key for both of these, for your inventory and your GRIR. So for inventory, the transaction key is something BSX. So it is called as BSX. So the system automatically, depending upon the movement type that we are using in the MyGo transaction, if it is a 121 movement where it is a normal goods received from your vendor and you are posting it onto your inventory, then the system will automatically map it with the BSX transaction key. This is a standard settings. This one we can also verify in the transaction called as OMJJ. OMJJ is a transaction where all your material movement transactions are mapped to your transaction keys, And based on this, we can determine what is the GL account. Your movement types are mapped with your transaction keys. Similarly, for GRIR account, there is another transaction key called as WRX. So what are we doing is we are mapping our GL accounts based on this transaction keys. That means BSX is having one GL account and WRX is having one GL account. Now, whenever a movement type is calling BSX transaction key, or whenever a movement type is mapped with BSX transaction key, then this BSX is already linked with one particular GL account for an inventory. So the system is automatically able to determine the inventory GL account, and it is able to post it. So this is the linkage between your MyGo transaction key, the MyGo transaction and the BSX transaction key, and how the GL account is being determined. Similarly, if the MyGo transaction is, or the movement type, whatever we are using in this MyGo for the transaction is calling the WRX transaction key, then we are already assigning a WRX transaction key with some particular GL account in OBYC, and that is where it is able to pick up this GL account. So it's a very plain, simple case, but it's a straightforward case that there is only one transaction key and there is only one GL account that is being mapped to it. So let us first do it till this point. So let us first go to OBYC, or before even going to OBYC, yeah, maybe I'll go to OBYC first. So here we are having different transaction keys. Let us see here. If you are having something called as a BSX, which is for your inventory postings. So all the postings onto inventory are called by this transaction key BSX. And here if you double click this one for the charts of account, it is asking what are all the different GL accounts. Now see here, there are further classifications of how the GL account should be determined for these different types of transaction keys. For example, you're having something called as a valuation modifier. Let us try to understand it later. And there is something called as a valuation class. So now let us go back and let us try to understand what is your valuation modifier and what is your valuation class. Now valuation class is something that will determine how a particular material type will be evaluated. At the end, every material will have a value, right? So this value is either something that is fetched from your supplier, that means whether it is a moving average price that is being used here, or it is your standard price that you're calculating by your product costing programs or by your product costing scenarios, and then you're arriving at a particular standard price of a particular material, depending upon whether it is a raw material or finished goods or semi-finished goods. Now this valuation of a particular material is something that is determined by your valuation class. Every material is assigned to a valuation classes. So let us first check that. So let us go to materials management. Here we have valuation and account assignment, and let us go by one here first. Let us see account determination without wizard, and define valuation control. This configuration we have already seen earlier. What is the valuation level of your particular client. So there are two types of valuations possible. One is the valuation at a plant level, or the other one is at valuation at a company code level. That means materials are treated differently at a plant level, or treated differently at a company code level. The recommended approach is to use a plant as a valuation level. So we have already configured it earlier. Now here what we are trying to define is the valuation control. If you open this, it is saying valuation grouping code. This valuation grouping code is also called as a valuation modifier. So what is this valuation modifier or a valuation grouping code? Now what we are saying is our valuation level is plant. That means at each and every plant, the account determination or the valuation of a particular material is treated differently. So a single material, you are creating a raw material. This same raw material, you are having a raw material called as an alloy, and from which you are probably manufacturing steel. So this particular alloy, whatever you are using, the raw material whichever you have procured, how the account determination for this for this raw material should happen at individual plant level. Now if there are two plants, and in two different plants you want to use two separate sets of GL accounts for your inventory, how are you going to do it? Because earlier what did we see? What we saw is that The MyGo transaction is having two different transaction keys, and this different transaction key will call what is the GL account. Now, let us assume there are two different plans, and for both of these plans, what are we using? We are using the same transaction code MyGo, and this MyGo is having the same uh, the transaction keys. The assignment between your movement type and the transaction key will never change. There is a SAP standard that is provided, and the assignment between your transaction key and your GL account also we are considering it as straightforward. That means WRX is having one GL account and BSX is having one GL account. So whenever the system is calling this BSX transaction key, the system will automatically call this inventory GL account. Similarly, whenever there is a WRX transaction key that is being called in MyGo transaction, it will automatically post it onto the GRIR account. Now, there are two different plans in our setup. For one plant, we want this GL account is probably, let us see, some starting with 2001. And in another plant, we want the inventory GL account to be 3001. Similarly, here, or let us take it as 2101. Here you are having GRIR account. Here also you want to use something called 3001, and here you want to use 3101. So by seeing at the GL account, you will try to understand which plant is this GL account belonging to. So that is your intention, and now you want to set up at two different levels. That means if you try to understand this, the valuation, that means how the accounting is being determined, is different at a different plant level. Now, this is the reason why we're having a valuation level. The initial setting where we saw whether the valuation level is your company code or your plant, this is the reason. Now, if you wanted two different account determinations at different plants, but if your valuation level is set as your company code, then you would not be able to do this one. The entire company code, let us assume that two different plants are belonging to the same company code, which is a very high likely scenario. And as those are belonging to same company code, you would not be able to assign different sets of GL accounts here for the same company code and for different plants falling under that company code. So that kind of granularity, the level of detailing at which you can set up your account determination will be lost if you have chosen company code as your valuation level. So that is the reason SAP also recommends to use plant as your valuation level, which we also used. Now you are having plant as your valuation level. Now let us take a further more detailed scenario. You are having 10 different plants, and out of these 10 different plants, for the first 5 plants you want to use this as your GL account, and another 5 plants you want to use this as your inventory GL account. Now if you are if you are requiring this kind of a setup, what are we going to do if you go to OBYC? So before we go that, let us see here, find valuation classes. So here we're having something called as a valuation grouping code. So first now let us try to understand what is a valuation grouping code. As we are having this kind of a requirement wherein we are saying that for the 5 different sets of plants which are falling under the same company code or maybe different company code, we are not bothered of that at this point, because if we take that scenario where the plants are belonging to different company codes but the charts of account is same, so your account determination can also be the same across different company codes, but you can still differentiate it at a plant level. So let us not take that complex case. Let us take there is only one company code and 10 different plants under one company code. And for 5 of the plants, you want to have one GL account for inventory, and another 5 you want to have another GL account for the inventory. So if you want to determine this one, ideally how you need to map. Let us take one. So here you're having your BSX, right? Let me take this scenario here. So how you are going to do your mapping for BSX transaction key, you are going to map your GL account as 2001, but this is at a plant level. So what are you going to do? You are having a plant as P001. You are going to do this one. Similarly, there is one more entry you need to maintain for 2001, same account for P002. Similarly, you need to maintain this for 3, 4 and 5. So total 5 different entries you have maintained here. And next again you are going to have one more entry here, BSX 2101. Your plant is P006. Similarly, you are going to maintain for 7, 8, 9 and 10. So totally you are maintaining 10 different entries in order to determine your inventory GL account depending upon the plant which you are using. So this is a cumbersome process. 10 plants is still fine, but in a real world you'll be having lots and lots of plants and maintaining these kind of settings for each transaction key. Now this is not only for one transaction key, but the same GRIR account you want to maintain separately in your invoice also. That means you need to use also your WRX transaction key. There also you need to maintain 10 different accounts. So 10 different entries for account determination. So that is a quite cumbersome task. So what SAP did is, if you are having same kind of a valuation for a set of plants, then group together all those plants into something called as a valuation grouping code. Now, why it is called as a valuation grouping code? Because your plant is also called as your valuation area. So this is because plant is the area at which you are doing all your valuations, because we have selected plant as our valuation level. So every plant is a valuation area. Now we are grouping together these valuation areas, and that we are calling it as valuation grouping code. So let us assume that plants P001 through P005 is grouped something called as a G1, group 1, and P006 through P010 is grouped 2 as G2. Now we need not maintain 10 different entries here. Rather, how we are going to maintain it is, we will maintain BSX for group 1. Here we are not using plant, but rather we are using your valuation grouping code B1, and we will just mention the account 2001 and one more entry BSX G2 2101. So we have reduced the effort by 80% just by grouping together different plants which are having same valuation model into one group called as a valuation grouping code. So that is the purpose of having a valuation grouping code. In our case, although we are having only one grouping code, we are not able to show it in the system. But if you're having multiple plants, if you're having multiple valuation areas, then all those valuation areas, for example, see this example here. So we're having two different plants, 1007 and 1008, and we have assigned, if we want to group these together, I will assign something called as maybe M001 or M0G1. So let me give this and let me put it here. So now what we're doing is, instead of maintaining these two plants separately, we can directly maintain this valuation grouping code. Wherever we are giving this valuation grouping code, the system will automatically take into consideration these two valuation areas which are grouped together under this name. So this is the purpose of having your valuation grouping code. Now let me go to our valuation area, which is TSM1, our plant. So TSM1, let us give it as valuation grouping code as TS01. Further, if I create any more plants, then I'm going to come here and I'm going to give the same valuation grouping code. If my valuation is same for this valuation area, that means this plant and the new plant that we're going to create. So save it. So this is the purpose of having a valuation grouping code. So, or valuation modifier, both are same. So this transaction BSX, now we understood what is valuation modifier. Now let us try to understand what is a valuation class. We already discussed that valuation class will help us to determine or differentiate on how the asset is to be evaluated. Sorry, how the material is to be evaluated. Now, why do we require a valuation class? Because we are already having a plant, we are grouping these plants together. Now, what is the further purpose of having your valuation class? So, this example till here is fine. Now, in your procurement process, you might procure different types of materials. You might procure some raw materials. These raw materials might be something that you're using for your procurement process, for your manufacturing process, or you might be procuring some service materials which you are not using for your manufacturing, but this is something for your internal services. You might also be procuring your stationaries, which are not something ultimately you're going to sell or something, but you're just going to consume on your day-to-day operations by your different teams. So there are different types of materials that you are going to procure. So obviously, when there are different types of materials, when the nature of materials are different, you obviously want to have different sets of GL accounts for those respective inventory. Now, if you have procured your raw material which you're using for manufacturing, you want to keep that inventory separately, and the stationery products which you are using, for example, your pens or your notepads, you want to record that inventory separately. And even within the stationery also, for example, it is a pen. These pens, you want to have different inventory account. And if you are having notepads, that you want to maintain a separate inventory account, because obviously you do not want to mix up all these different types of materials in your inventory. So to keep those separately, we want different types of GL accounts. Now, in our mapping of your transaction key to your GL account, we have used valuation grouping code. This valuation grouping code is differentiating your GL account at a valuation area level. That means at your plant level. But how are we going to differentiate it depending upon your material level? Now we have a material type what we have created earlier as your raw materials. For example, if you see, we have created a material type TSRM, which is your raw materials. Now there are a lot of raw materials. So there are different types of raw materials. For example, RM1, RM2, you are having different types of raw materials. And similarly, other than raw materials, also you might be having separate some other raw materials. Probably you might say TSSN. I would create something called as stationary materials. So here also you might be having something called as a pens, or you might be having uh, notepads. So there are different types of materials that you're using. Now for each of these, you want to have a separate set of GL account. But this differentiation is not at a plant level. So how are we going to further differentiate this one? This we are going to differentiate by using something called as a valuation class. So let us assume for raw material 1, we are creating a valuation class, sorry, VRM1. And for raw materials 2, we are having a valuation class VRM2. Now, pens, you are having something called as, maybe let us take it as a finished product, because we are not, this is not our raw material, this is our finished product. So we are directly procuring this one. So let us take it as VFG1. Although finished goods will have a different definition, it is something that we are manufacturing at our own facilities by converting our raw materials into our finished goods. But just for the sake of easiness, I am just mentioning it as VFG2. Now we are treating this as finished goods in our example. Now, in our account determination settings, in our OBYC settings, in addition to having valuation grouping code, we are also having something called as a valuation class. So let us see how we can make use of that. Now we are having something called as BSX, G1, and instead of directly assigning the GL account at this combination, let us say I am also using my valuation class. So all these raw material of type 1, I want to have it onto 2011 or 2001. And if the raw material is belonging to this same grouping code, but if it is VRM2, then I'm going to use 2011. So this is still possible. That means my plan did not change, my company code did not change, the material type is also still the same. That means all these are different types of raw materials only. But within the type of raw material, I wanted to maintain a separate GL account. Then that we are doing it by using a valuation class. Every material master data MM01 will have a valuation class assigned in the material master data, which will help us to determine what is the accounting. So similarly, if you go to our other stationary materials, then I'm going to have one more entry, BSX G1, VFG1, and here I'm going to maintain an account. Probably this is finished goods. Let me take it as 2021, and BSX G1, VFG2, 2031. So similarly for G2 also, I will maintain the same 4 sets of entries. So these 4 sets of entries I will be maintaining at my G2 level also. So here I am going to change this as G2, and here we are going to maintain 2-1 for all of this. So this is how we are going to maintain OBYC by utilizing our valuation grouping code as well as valuation class. So let us try to define various valuation classes. So this is valuation class. Now if I select this valuation class also and hit save, it is asking me what is the combination of GL account for this combination of valuation grouping code or valuation modifier and valuation class. So for that, first let us, we have defined valuation grouping code, we have determined as TS01, but we also need to determine what are the different valuation classes. So let me go back and let us define valuation classes. So here we are having something called as a valuation classes. SAP had by default provided various valuation classes for each type of materials. If you see, there are different types of raw materials. For each of these raw materials, we're having different types of valuation classes. So the standard one for raw materials is 3000. I'm not changing anything, we are not creating anything, but let us make use of the same. And 7900 is for our semi-finished products, and finished products is 7920. See here, every valuation class is having an assignment to an account category reference. So let us try to understand what is our account category reference. So account category reference will determine what type of material is that. So here if you see, it is semi-finished goods which is having 0008 and finished products 09, and you're having raw materials for which we are giving, okay, this is someone where they have created this as a copy, but 001 is for your raw materials. Similarly, operating supplies, for example, if I'm saying it as stationaries, then we are going to use this one. Spare parts, packagings. So different types of materials, you can have different valuation classes, and each of those you can have a separate set of your GL accounts. Now, what is the purpose of account category reference? In this account category reference, we did not mention anything. It is just a dummy ID that we have created. We have created an ID 0001 and we have given a name for it, but it is not having any parameters. But still, this is assigned to our valuation classes. So, what is the purpose of this one? That we can find it out in material type and account category reference. See here, this account reference is assigned to the material type. That means material type is in turn assigned to account category reference, and this is in turn assigned to your valuation class. So by this linkage, we are restricting what are the different valuation classes that are allowed for a particular material type. That means for raw material, if you are choosing an raw material of type, let us say TSRM, whatever we have created. So in this TSRM, we are not going to allow valuation classes that belongs to finished goods. So that even by mistake also users should not be allowed to use that particular valuation class that belongs to finished goods in any raw material master. So for that kind of a restriction, we are linking this material type with account reference, and account reference is linked with your valuation class. But why can't we directly link material type with valuation class? The same logic, we are trying to simplify the things. Now, there are a lot of raw material type valuation classes. Instead of maintaining all those assignments, for example, now we are having one raw material type. Let me again take me to you here. So we are having raw material type as ROH, or probably whatever we have created, TSRM. Now there are different types of valuation classes. There are 4 valuation classes what we saw here, right? We are having VRM1, VRM1, we are having VRM2. Let us say we are having few more, VRM3 and VRM4. There are 4 different types of raw materials. Now there are 4 different valuation classes for these raw materials, and if we want to assign this or restrict these usage of valuation classes, this raw material specific valuation classes to this raw material type, then we need to maintain 4 entries for linkage. We are maintaining TSRM and VRM1, TSRM and VRM2. Like that, we are going to maintain 4 different entries. Instead, what we are doing is we are linking all these VRM1, VRM2, 3 and 4 to one account category reference called as 001, and material type we are not going to change. Material type level, we are always linking this TSRM material type to our account category reference 001. So only at a valuation class, whenever you are creating a new valuation class, you are directly just linking it to 001. And you might be having multiple multiple material types that are of raw material type. You might still want, that is up to the business, if you want to segregate it at valuation class level, or if you want to create multiple raw material types. So let us assume that you're having one more raw material, TSR2. If you're having 2 different, then again all these 4 entries you need to maintain. So total 8 entries you need to maintain if you want to link all your 4 valuation classes to all 2 different types of material types. So instead of maintaining 8 entries, what we are doing is we are maintaining 4 entries where we are linking it with our account category reference, and we are maintaining 2 entries where we are linking our account category reference with our material type. So total within 6 entries, we are going to complete this entire linkage or restriction of valuation classes to your material types. So this kind of an convenience we are providing by adding one more parameter called as an account as category reference. So now this is just a small number, we are not finding much difference, but when you see lots and lots of materials in a real project, then it will make a lot of difference. It will drastically reduce the number of line items that you need to maintain in your configuration. So I'm not creating anything more. I'm not creating any new valuation classes. So we are just using the same uh, we are just using the same valuation classes which are provided by SAP. Now let us go to OBYC. So for BSX, which is our inventory posting. Now inventory posting, there are different types of materials we saw. We saw raw materials, there are finished goods, there are semi-finished goods. Depending upon what you are procuring, you need to have a separate GL account, right? So valuation modifier, we can still use it here, but as per SAP standard, whenever you are using a valuation class, whenever you are having a transaction key BSX, system does not consider the valuation grouping code. This is only for BSX. Here the system does not consider what is the valuation grouping code. Even for WRX also, I believe. So there are few different transaction cases, especially whatever we are calling it in our MyGo posting, your GRIR account and your inventory postings. So here the system will ignore this valuation modifier. This is the standard behavior. This can be overwritten by some code changes in your function module that is calling this one. But by default, the standard one is that the system will ignore what is the valuation modifier in your BSX transaction key and WRX transaction key, which is for your GRIR account. So at a valuation class level, for example, we are having 3000. We need to mention what is the inventory account for raw materials, and 7900, which is semi-finished goods, and 7920, which is your finished goods. So under OBYC, for each and every valuation class, for raw material valuation class, we are maintaining what is the inventory account. So that, let us take it from here. So for raw material stock, we have maintained it as CA00001. For semi-finished goods, it is CA00002 and CA00003. So this is for our raw material inventory accounts, or for all the material types of inventory account which we used in our MIGO posting, goods receipt postings. Now we are done with the inventory account mapping, and let us go to our freight account mapping. So for freight account mapping, the account key is freight clearing, which is FR1. Here also we are going to take valuation class only. Valuation modifier is not required here because we are having only one valuation modifier. But still, if you want, we can do it. And in addition to this one, if you see here, we're having a debit and credit. That means your freight can be both a debit as well as your credit. So depending upon the key, if you want to differentiate, if you want to use different GL accounts for your debit freight and your for credit freight, then you can also choose your debit or credit indicator here so that you can assign your GL accounts based on this combination. For example, if I save these set of rules, that means I have selected valuation class and debit or credit. So it is asking me to enter two different GL accounts, one for debit and one for credit, for each and every valuation class. But I want to have one single account, so let me save it by removing this indicator debit and credit, and let us now enter the assign the GL accounts. Let us click on GL accounts. Now for valuation class, so we most likely are procuring your raw materials. So for this valuation class 3000, which is raw materials, we are having our freight expense accounts. So what is our freight expense account? We have maintained it as L000001. So let us give it as 1 2 3 4 5 and save it. After our freight, we are going to our GRIR account, which is our WRX. So let us go to WRX, which is GRIR clearing account. Let us select this one. Here you are having one more indicator, which is called as a general modification. So general modification is what something we did not see it in any of the configurations. We saw what is a valuation class. We saw what is a valuation modifier. We saw our debit and credit indicators, but there is something new called as a general modification. So let us try to understand what is the general modification. SAP had provided certain further classifications in the form of general modifiers. So we are having valuation modifiers, we're having valuation classes. Now these, depending upon the type of transactions that is being performed. For example, let us take offsetting entries. For example, when you are posting onto a particular consumption, that means you are consuming your raw materials, then you would want to hit your raw material consumption account. Now for this raw material consumption account, if you want to further, you can classify your raw material consumption based on your valuation classes. Let me take you to this one. So if you see here, we are having raw material consumption accounts. So raw material consumption account, you can classify based upon your valuation classes. So for each and every valuation class, you can use different type of accounts. And the transaction key is GBB. Now the same GBB is also used for your COGS. It is also used for your change in inventory. So how are we going to differentiate based on the same transaction key? How are we going to differentiate the different types of transactions? Whether it is a consumption posting that is being done, or whether it is a change in inventory posting being done, or whether it is your COGS account that is being done. So this is something that we can differentiate based on what is a general modifier. SAP had provided various general modifiers by default, which we can use, and each general modifier determines what is a different type of your transaction that is being used. This is the type of GL account that we are assigning. So for example, if you see here, we are having different types of change in inventory accounts, and there are three different types of general modifiers. So let us try to understand what are these different types of general modifiers. For example, let us take AUF and ZOF. The valuation class is also same, obviously, so the GL account is also same, the transaction type is same, but what are we trying to differentiate it here? So AUF will determine whether it is a production receipt with production order, and ZOF is used when it is a production receipt type of a posting, but there is no production order that is assigned as a cost object. So depending upon the nature of transaction that is being posted, SAP allows us to further segregate the type of posting and assign our GL account much more precisely. So in our WRX postings, that means our GRIR account, we do not actually need general modifier. So what we can do is we can directly select our valuation class, and debit and credit indicator is also something that we do not require. We just need our valuation modifier and valuation class. Save the rules. Here our valuation modifier, we give it as TS01, and valuation class is 3000, which is our raw materials. So for raw materials, we usually use our GRIR account, right? So what is the GL account that we have created for GRIR raw materials? It is MISC005. So let us assign this. Save it. So till now what we saw different types of GL postings that we have configured, right? If we go back to our P2P cycle, we have configured how the system should fetch the inventory account, what are the GRIR account that the system should use, and we also saw what is a freight account. And now we are going to determine other types of accounts like your consumption accounts, your COGS accounts. For example, if you're using production, your manufacturing process, how the system should determine what is your production account, what is your change in inventory account, the COGS account, your consumption accounts, and all those. So these are called as offsetting accounts. That means these are offsetting accounts that in each and every transaction, and we are going to define it here. So offsetting account for inventory posting is the transaction key GBB. Let us go here. Here we are going to select valuation modifier, general modification, and also your valuation class. Save the keys. Your valuation modifier is always TS01. We are having only one valuation modifier, so let us create TS01. You can also do an F4 here. Okay. Your general modifier, first one, let us try to assign a raw material consumption account, VBR. Your valuation class is 3000, which is raw materials. So raw material consumption account we have maintained as E00006. Copy and enter. And next one is again VBR, which is our consumption, and this time we are going to maintain it for semi-finished goods consumption. So let us give it as E00007. Next TS01. Now after consumption we are having COGS accounts, so let us have VAY, and this one is for 7920, which is your finished product. So let us give the COGS account E00008. TS01 again, let us give it as for VAX. So this is during the time of your outbound delivery. That means you are issuing your stock from your inventory and you are using it for some other purpose. So we are giving our consumption accounts. Sorry, we are hitting our COGS accounts. That means we are selling our finished products. So if you see the valuation class also, it is your finished product. That means this is not your consumption, but this is your issuing, you are selling your finished goods. That means from your inventory, whatever you have stored from your inventory or stock, that product you are sending it out. That means you are doing an outbound delivery. So at the time of outbound delivery, what is the GL account that the system should pick is what we are defining it here. There are two general modifiers for this one, VAY and VAX. VAY is wherever you're having a cost object assigned. VAX is where you're not having a cost object assigned. So in both the cases, we will be using the same GL account E008 and E008. Now again TS01. Now let us try to define our production receipts accounts. So we're having AUF, semi finished goods 7900. Let us give the change in inventory account E00009. Maybe here we can have, let us do one thing, let us try to change this account. Let us give a semi finished goods change in inventory. And let us copy this and let us make a new account for finished goods change in inventory. And save it. So E009 is for semi-finished goods and TS01 AUF, this is for finished product. 7920 is the valuation class, and here let us give it as 10. Copy it. TS01. Now it is ZOF 7920. If there's a production order, then it is ZOF, and E0010 TS01 ZOP again for finished goods E0010. So these are some primary accounts that we require for all our basic or most important or most commonly posted material transactions. So there can be much more also. There can be much more general modifiers and you can use depending upon the business requirement. So this is our FIMM integration process flow. So we need to understand why are we mapping it and what is the logical reasoning of why we are doing all these configurations, so that it will be easier for us to understand and analyze whenever there is any issue in account determination. It will be easier for us to understand what is the root cause for this one and what entry needs to be changed if we try to logically understand the entire connection between the FI and MM integration or the GL account determination. Hope you have found the video useful. Do not forget to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.